Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Fora. This is Peter Mullins. Really happy to have Will Bernholz here. Will's a digital leader and also a fractional CMO for a healthcare company called Green Hill. So, Will, welcome to Fora. Appreciate you joining.
Thank you, Peter. It's a pleasure.
Excellent. Well, you've had a fascinating background, particularly in the last 12 months. I'd love to hear a bit more about your experience. So maybe would you mind just giving a quick introduction to yourself?
Happy to. So what Peter is referring to is about 18 months ago, my now fiance, was girlfriend at the time, and I decided we were going to experiment a little bit with the digital nomad lifestyle and shifted into a fractional role with the technology startup I was working with, and started traveling and consulting along the way. So that took us to some really cool places in Africa, Asia, and in New Zealand. But as everyone I'm sure is aware, the world changed a bit in 2020, and we ended up stranded in New Zealand for 7 months, which was awesome. And it was perfect just because we were able to work effectively, great internet there, and great lifestyle as well. So we got really lucky. But yeah, the last 18 months have been quite interesting.
I imagine, yeah. So, just thinking about that working remotely, working in that fashion. Like, what was your setup like? Like, tell me about how you collaborated with folks that were 12 hours or even more, I guess, different, and working
Well,
remote.
yeah, it was different. And so, yeah, I feel grateful that having lived internationally before, I was fresh out of college. I lived in China for 5 years. I had, in some ways, am used to the idea of talking to, whether it was family or others within different time zones. So that wasn't brand new to me, but working across several different time zones where it wasn't always necessarily the same, 1 month to the other, I might be in a new time zone, did require some adjustments. But for the most part, as a fractional CMO for a handful of companies, I found that I was able to do a lot of that work asynchronously.
Right.
And being fractional allowed me a lot of flexibility. So from a structural standpoint, it worked well, where I would just work with the companies I was collaborating with and working for to establish what office hours looked like,
Mm-hmm.
and what projects looked like, and establish my own rhythm so that we could go on a safari and get our jobs done, because my fiance was working as well. From a physical setup, I traveled with this MacBook. It's my baby.
Yeah.
I had a laptop stand, which I really loved. It's made by a company called Roost, which I highly recommend, which would bring my laptop up so that I wasn't constantly hunched over.
Mm-hmm.
And I traveled with a keyboard and a mouse, and that was it, and a cell phone. And so if there wasn't good Wi-Fi, we would do a hotspot.
Right.
And I carried my setup with me at all times. It was my precious setup, and it worked. It worked lovely everywhere from Kenya to Indonesia.
That's great. So, we've heard a lot about like that fractional model where it's fractional CMO. How do you think about applying that? Are you mostly operating at that strategic level where you're evaluating almost like a consultant and evaluating what the needs are and then making recommendations, or are you operating at both levels, both the strategic but also in some of that execution?
Implementation. So far, my experience has been you got to be able to do both.
Mm-hmm.
I am yet to work in a VP of marketing director, or a fractional role where it's been all on the strategic level. I don't know if you have, but I haven't.
Right.
I've always had to be willing to be that player coach, working manager that's got his hands in the weeds. And I think that as a fractional role, it depends on the company, but for me, it's always been both. So there was a lot of strategic conversations and planning on the executive level, with this other C-suite and other leaders within the company, or the business owners in some cases.
Right.
But there was quite a bit of execution that they needed as well. Not always was there someone to say, okay, here's what needs to be done, go have so-and-so do it. When there would be a team that could execute, or an agency partner who would execute. But I got my hands dirty often. So I would say I split, sometimes with one client, it might be 50-50. With another, it might be 80-20 execution to strategic plan, where they just need to get things done.
Yeah.
And so it really depends, and it's seasonal as well.
Right. So with those customers where it was more on the strategic and kind of getting that plan in place, what was you did this across a number of companies. So what was your
Mhm.
game plan for going in and really trying to mine out what their priorities were so that you could start building that plan?
Yeah, I think most engagements that I've experienced, people come in with an idea of what they want. They're generally not engaging with a fractional CMO or seeking consultant help unless they feel like there's a problem. So there's typically a fire burning or an opportunity that they're considering that you start doing customer development and research and discovery on that issue. Often I find that other things emerge from that where they think that we just need to increase our market share in
Right.
this area, or we just need to launch a new product, or we just need more revenue. They think they know what the problem is and they're asking you to solve that narrow problem. But what I found is through discovery with an executive team, you'll find that either there are more structural issues they need, or they have a solution in place that is just not being executed effectively. So
Right.
I think for me, it's always go in with a beginner mindset, a discovery session with all the different people that I'm going to be working with, spend the first several hours or even days or weeks of an engagement just getting the lay of the land
Mhm.
before I start making any kind of recommendations or jumping into implementation. And I think that's been effective for me so far.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And are you coming in and it's like CEO and all the leadership team, or are you working with like VPs of sales, or how do you pick and choose who you're going to be teaming up with for that mining?
It really depends. And so if we look at my first foray into doing what I would call to as a fractional CMO, I was previously the vice president of marketing for that company, and so you
Right.
could call me a fractional VP of marketing, but there was no other C-suite marketing executive within the organization. So fractional CMO is just more or less words.
Right. Right.
So I was interfacing directly with the CEO in that company. And so the CEO of that company and I were collaborating on what the strategy was. And
Mhm.
in that role, I actually doubled up from I was owning the marketing channel, but also doing direct sales. And so
Okay.
what they actually needed in that engagement was we need someone who's going to not only help us source client opportunities, but also soften the beach for the CEO to come in and close the deal, because there was software development involved. It was a SaaS company that was transitioning to more of a services model. So
Right.
in that case, direct CEO and I collaborating, there was no team that I was helping pull the strings. Fast forward to now, I stepped into a company where there was an executive leadership team. There was a head of business development. There was a head of sales. In our organization, we call it admissions,
Yeah.
because it's in the healthcare business. And so I found that with that, I was slotting into a leadership team
Right.
as a fractional member, and I had to navigate that, which is very different from where I'm just joining an owner of a business and interfacing with them directly. So between those two different approaches, but both have their value.
Yeah, that makes sense. So now Green Hill, as you mentioned, is in the healthcare space. So
Mm.
I know you from SaaS and from mobile, and so
Tech guy.
yeah, exactly, yeah. So talk to me about differences there. I mean, maybe we could start with the customer, and so the
Mhm.
customer needs, because that to me seems like the most radically different part of the equation.
Sure. So just as a little bit of background on me, so this will, I think, aid the story. I did work in New York for a hospital system for Mount Sinai for a couple years, and that was my first experience of working in healthcare. But that was a large hospital matrix organization, 50,000 plus employees. And I learned a lot from that experience about what it means to work in healthcare and what marketing in a hospital system looks like. I would often meet people and I'd say, I work in marketing for a hospital. They say hospitals have marketing. They couldn't quite grasp that. And trust me, in New York, they do. But in this business, we're in the mental health and substance use treatment field.
Mm,
And in that field, we are, the goal of the organization that I'm working with today is how can we improve the outcomes using better treatment methodologies
mm,
and technology. And that's what excited me about it was how
mm,
can you have a great company culture, great curriculum and clinical practice coupled with innovative ideas and technology to improve outcomes. And so that's sort of a company ethos, human flourishing
Yeah.
made better through culture and technology. But it is different than technology,
Right.
working in a B2B enterprise software sales and helping people, what we call the helping practice, the helping field is quite different. So there's a lot of differences. And I think I've had to, as a marketer, adjust expectations, adjust my language, adapt to industry sort of norms, as I would
Right.
say. And some of those have been quite different. And there's been some growing pains for me as a professional, but it's been highly interesting and every day's been different.
That's super interesting. Yeah, and what jumped out to me when you're saying about like shifting the language is your use of the word outcome, which I understand is pretty common in the healthcare space. Because when I think about like a B2B SaaS or whatever, are metrics around wanting to get more customers on board, right? But
Right.
but for you to switch to that outcome as an important, the patient outcome is an important thing. How do you think about goals? Like how do you shape up what a goal is if what you're really aiming for is that great outcome for a patient?
Sure. And so for me and this organization, which I think is very forward thinking and is run by younger, hungrier, entrepreneurial, but also very much motivated by a purpose around helping people.
Mm,
If you combine those things together, you get a really interesting mix. And so I'd say the answer to that is we are, at our nature, a for profit business. We are not a nonprofit. And as a
yeah.
for profit business, there is a component that is not, you can't ignore the idea of we need to be a sustainable business, and sustainable business is through revenue, is through profit, is
Mm,
through growth. And so how do we talk about that internally? We use the word growth quite a bit,
right.
both on a personal growth, professional growth, and business growth.
Mm,
So I think bringing that parlance and having that be a company value is very important, but there is sensitivity. We don't simply talk about leads, conversion rates, funnels, and nurture pipeline. Some of the language that we might use, customers,
mm,
um, and even clients. I mean, client, I think, is one of the words that we've had to become used to because in a healthcare setting, you think of a patient. We use the term client internally as a connector to customer,
right.
client. And so I think that language has been interesting. But when it comes to outcomes, I focus on the clinical team to be responsible ultimately for patient outcomes. I, on the marketing and business and outreach side, can help find and source great opportunities for us to help people. And that means putting us in the right place and the right time, making us discoverable so
Mm,
that people who need the help are able to find it. And so that's how I think of marketing's role in in a healthcare business, and especially the helping profession, is awareness.
mhm,
How do I build brand awareness in my market? How do I make us discoverable?
right.
And building trust so
Yes.
that when someone is in crisis or seeking a service that we offer,
Mhm,
they encounter our brand, they find us, we're discoverable, and they trust us enough to engage with us. And then from there, I let the clinical professionals take over and do what they do best.
right. So that amount of trust. I mean, this is as you said, this is someone that's in crisis. So trust has to be is critical. Do you like how do you go about building up that trust over time? And well, I'll pause. I have a follow up, but maybe just start there. And so what are you doing to do that?
That's a great question. And I think it's not a new answer, but it's somewhat new in this industry, which is education.
Right.
And what that means for us is we need to make sure that, and building credibility through educational materials, people and their families seeking help for mental health or substance use crises, someone who's seeking a change in their life is the ultimate market
Right.
for a healthcare business like this one. So families make up, I think, a vast majority of the people who are seeking out providers who can provide that service, as well as other healthcare professionals seeking to make a referral. So when they interact with our brand, how are we building trust? I think one of the most important ways that became challenging during COVID was direct interaction.
Mm.
And so that means having a clinical to clinical interaction be easily accessible so that an industry professional is able to see and speak to our clinicians and understand our clinical practice to say, I like the way they do business. I think their practice is sound and credible, so that if I refer someone over to them, I have confidence that they are going to do everything they can to help this person. With an individual, I think there's a lot of imagery and messaging and empathy and compassion that needs to be transmitted through a brand and through messaging, which is a very important way of building trust. And trust is one of those things that that is difficult to build but easy to break.
Yeah.
And so we have to be very careful as we engage with people, whether it's on the web, on the phone, or in person, that we are always seeking to reinforce our brand messaging, and that is one of empathy, caring, compassion, and that we always want what's best for that person. And I think that culturally as an organization is fundamental to us. And so that, I think, is how we can build up trust, is by showing empathy at every turn.
Right. And I imagine that goes across both groups, both the referral as well as the direct clients. Yeah. So just maybe we can continue on that one thread there of those two different groups there, the referrals as well as like those folks that are direct.
Right.
So when I think about like content and awareness and building up trust over a long period of time, it's easier when you have people that are living and swimming in that environment, right? So if let's say I was selling a finance tool, building out content that specifically targets finance professionals, they're out there, they're not necessarily looking for me, but they're looking for information about finance, and they're swimming in that pool, so I can get out there. So to me, it feels like, or what was occurring to me was, when you're talking when you're marketing to the folks that are in the referral spot, bucket, if you will, that seems like that would be not easier, but it's more clean, that you're able to provide materials to them because they're living in that world, whereas an individual isn't,
right.
So how do you go after that, or how do you reach out to that other space that isn't swimming in that pool?
That's a great question, and I have a couple things I'll say to that. The first is that when it comes to industry professionals, and so just like you've gone to one doctor who's identified that you have an issue, if you go to your primary care physician and you're having a heart issue, they will refer you to a heart specialist. Our industry is similar. Someone will engage with a therapist, a counselor, or some other general practitioner, their family doctor, will identify a mental health or substance use issue, and therefore will make a referral to a specialist. And we are specialists in that area. And so that's what we mean when we say a referring professional.
Yeah.
There are those, like you would assume, have a wide understanding and communicate easily about what we do, how we offer, and the benefits of working with a specialist, and what's unique between one provider and another. But there is education on that side as well, because mental health and substance use for a long time, I think, in our society have been stigmatized to a point of not wanting to be talked about in polite society. It's not something that was really, we don't get educated a lot on that in schools. It's not something that's talked about a lot, I think, more and more today in the media. But for a long period of time, it was kind of under the rug, and mental health and substance use was seen as not something to necessarily share publicly. It's something to be ashamed of. And so operating in that industry with professionals and individuals can be a challenge. So I think when it comes to those people and how do we educate them, there's two things that are most important. The first is we have to meet people where they are. The fact is that when someone is thinking that they need help with a mental health or substance use issue, they're probably going to Google search in the language that they know.
Right.
Words like rehab, for example, which in the industry, the practice is like a four-letter word. We don't like to
Sure.
call what we do rehab. We call it treatment. And so when you're doing SEO, do you SEO optimize around treatment, which is not the common term that someone uses, versus rehab, which is what the average family or person's going to seek out?
Yeah.
So those are some of the interesting choices you have to make in this industry about how do we get in front of people using the language they use versus what is the industry politically correct or preferred language.
Right.
Um, and overall, I've found that we answer a lot of really basic questions for people who don't understand what treatment for mental health or substance use issues looks like. They think it's 30, 60, 90 days in a rehab facility, and that's all they know. Whereas that's not even what we do.
Right.
We're a transitional living program, which is for aftercare, and
Mm.
we offer outpatient treatment primarily. And so there's a lot of education where people are coming to us saying, here's what I need, and that's not what we offer, and trying to explain to people through content and through direct interaction the differences and nuances in this industry. And so it's just being patient, answering questions. And as we get questions from people directly when they call us and say, here's what I'm wondering,
Right.
for me as a marketer, that's content that I can put on our website, on an FAQ, in a blog post, in a podcast, on a video, because if they have that question, there's probably 10 or 15 or 10,000 other people who have that same question.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine that a lot of those folks where it's a family member or a friend that's encouraging their loved one to get in, that they're wanting to do some research ahead of time to make sure that what they're doing is the right thing and that they're
Yep.
doing it a good way. So
100%. And for me, having being a digital native myself and stepping into this fractional role, having been in tech, healthcare previously, but creative and tech primarily for the last several years, it's been really new to me, and it's been very interesting. But what's been, I think, the most fulfilling and awesome part of this experience was bringing what I knew worked from SaaS, from tech, from B2B, and finding ways that we can apply that in this industry to reach more people, to help more people, to build awareness, and to provide education. Because there were strategies, tactics that are new to this industry that are commonly used in others. So being able to pull that in and be kind of a outsider on the inside
yeah,
has been really awesome, and I think has helped this business grow and reach more people.
that's great. What about the flip? Like what do you think you've learned from being in this space that you're like, next time I'm thinking about a big SaaS problem, a classic software problem. What do you think you take away from the healthcare space?
That's a great question. Truly, the value of personas has been reinforced to me again and again and again. And it's something that's interesting in a B2B sale where you have a different roles and stakeholders in what we'll call a deal. You've
Right.
got your decision maker, you've got your finance team, you've got your influencer, your evangelists, your naysayers. You've got these different roles, and then personas within your customer and your markets. I think it's reinforced for me the importance of clearly establishing those and having different strategies and approaches for those, because in this business and in this industry, we're dealing with parents, we're
Right.
dealing with husbands and wives, we're dealing with brothers and sisters, we're dealing with friends, we're dealing with other industry professionals across, and each are unique. There are trends within them, but they require delicate differences in approach.
Hmm.
Because like I mentioned earlier, trust is difficult to build but easy to break, and it can trying to apply the approach we would take with one person with another can send that person off into away from you, and you don't know when someone hangs up the phone not choosing not to use your services in this business whether they are going to seek out another option or not. And the ideal scenario is they're going to work with you, or we can refer them to someone who they can work with.
Right.
So the value of personas and developing unique approaches to those different personas and different people involved in the decision-making process
Yeah.
around purchasing a product or service have just been deeply reinforced for me here.
Got it. Now, you've got sort of those two persona groups, I guess, if you will, of the referrals and
Hmm.
the family members. Um, how else do you think that they differ? Like, the one thing that was occurring to me was around um, who's paying for it. Like, if it's a
Hmm.
family member, then it's probably there's going to be a copay, maybe, I'm not sure,
Hmm.
but there's going to be some financial impact versus a referring doctor that they're I guess they have a different set of incentives, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that affects us somewhat, but it's really more about, the bottom line is that referring professionals are overwhelmed.
Mm,
COVID has created, not that it wasn't already there, but has amplified what already was a mental health and substance use crisis.
mhm.
That I don't know a psychologist or psychiatrist who isn't fully booked and having a difficulty taking on new patients.
Right.
So with that, we have to be sensitive to referring professionals are often overwhelmed and are seeking to find good solutions for people that they may not be able to treat, or have special needs that are outside of their care.
Mhm.
So that is unique to them versus a family member who is often in crisis.
Right.
A family member who's seeking, or an individual who's seeking help for someone, is in crisis and has to be handled in a delicate way. And so, yeah, the finances are something that is not a fun topic
Yeah.
in healthcare whatsoever. I mean, try calling any doctor's office and trying to ask them about how much a specific procedure or service is going to cost, and you're going to get a lot of different answers or no answer at all.
Yeah.
So, for us, what makes Greenhill, I think, special and unique is that we have a company value of radical transparency.
Mm.
And so we do everything we can to communicate with people and to make it as clear as possible how the insurance system works,
Yeah.
what they can expect up front, as best as we can. The insurance companies don't make it easy, but that's one conversation we're having. Whereas within a referring professional, they're most concerned about who are you in network with,
Right.
because that's what most referents are going to ask. They're going to say, okay, I want to refer you someone who's your provider. I'm going to try and find you someone that's in network, because if you can, you want it to be in network. So it's generally, who are you in network with? And then, can I trust that if I send you a referral, you're going to take great care of them? With an individual or a family, that conversation is longer and more detailed.
Right. Okay. And it sounds like, I mean, as you said, like, the psychiatrists, psychologists are just overwhelmed right now. So the mental health profession has a ton going on. Do you
Mhm.
do you do you think of more trying to capture more of the market and trying to bring in more patients for more good outcomes, or are you thinking more about what other additional services can be offered to support those good outcomes? Where
Mm.
do you how do you divide your time between those two?
Yes. We of course do not talk about what we do in terms of market share. The way we view our capability is that there is greater demand than there is capacity for our bit within our business and other businesses to meet the needs of the local community and the state of North Carolina and here in the United States. So our our we help young men specifically from all over the country in our transitional living practice, whereas our outpatient practice is more local focused. So for us, I think we have two-pronged strategy when it comes to what are we doing as a marketing team, what are our biggest priorities.
Right.
And I'd say it centers around, I view it as a flywheel of awareness,
Hmm.
which is, are we building awareness of our brand amongst target audiences? And so those are potential referring professionals and family members and individuals who might be seeking out this type of service. And then we've got so in my flywheel, if I could go on the whiteboard, would have three words, and it would say awareness, cultivate, and retain. And so for us, it's about, are we making ourselves discoverable and building brand awareness in our marketplace? Are we where people can see us and find us?
Yeah.
Once they see us and find us, are we cultivating a relationship of trust with them so that they get to know us, who we are, and that we're a mission-driven, values-based organization, and they're able to see that and we demonstrate that. And then once they trust us to either refer to us or to engage with us as a resident or as a client, are we able to retain that trust through
Mhm.
great care? Do we have great outcomes with one of their referrals so that they are willing to refer to us again? Because we follow up with them and say, here's what has happened. We've worked with one of your patients, and here are the outcomes. And are they then confident to send us another referral in the future because they know we do great work and care for the people that come into our practice? And with individuals, it's the same way. If we don't provide a great service, they're not going to leave here and share with their friends and family and other people in the community that they had a good experience or that they received great care and treatment working with Greenhill. So from a priority standpoint, I think it's awareness is primarily the thing that we're focused on, but there are also new services, and I can talk more about that. But I'd say the answer is both. But I focused mostly on the awareness side so far.
That's great. Well, Will, this has been really, really a great conversation. But I'm just going to leave you with one softball, if you don't mind, which
No
is
problem.
you've lived and worked abroad extensively. How do you feel like that experience has shaped you as a marketer and your ability to to communicate to different people in different markets?
It's a great question. I began my career working in the entertainment industry in Beijing, China.
Mm.
So I cut my teeth during the 2008 Olympics working in a really fast-paced environment, and that was a really transformative experience,
Mm.
learning a language and then living in a foreign country. And I think that plus this year plus that we spent as digital nomads traveling all over the world has given me a greater appreciation for the uniqueness to each geography, each individual, and each problem and solution. I have seen across different industries similar solutions applied to, or a solution applied to a problem that doesn't match. And I've just really, have an appreciation for establishing the problem and then
Yeah.
identifying the unique solution to that problem, rather than just trying to take what worked over there and do it over here.
Hmm.
We learn a lot as marketers. I have a great deal. I call myself a full stack marketing executive because I have done everything under the sun and I know what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah.
But I'm not always right. And so being open and being willing to try new things and come up with novel solutions is, I think, what's changed about me through the course of my career. Not getting stagnant, keeping a learning mindset, and always staying open minded. I've grown into that through my career, and this experience with Greenhill is no different, where I've had to adjust my approach and then also ask the company to adjust its
Hmm.
in order to grow.
Right. That's great. That's terrific reflection and insight. I appreciate it. Well, Will, like I said, really enjoyed the conversation. It was great to catch up with
Thanks,
you and to
Peter.
hear your perspective. So thanks again.
Next time, let's talk about you more.
Sounds good.
I think I talked about myself. No, this was great. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to doing this again sometime.
Absolutely.